Good evening, Year 11, and here is your night before news for your English Literature Paper 1 that you will sit tomorrow, Thursday the 29th of February. So just as a recap of the key information, the paper that you will sit tomorrow will be an hour and 45 minutes. The paper is focused on the text Macbeth and A Christmas Carol. You will have to complete 2 essay questions in total, one on Macbeth and one on A Christmas Carol. You should aim to spend around 50 minutes on each question, and for each question you will be provided an extract. As well as responding to the extract, you would also need to make reference to other relevant parts of the text. Section A of the paper will be the Macbeth section. You could be asked to comment on either a theme or a character, or kind of a combination of both. Main characters that you could be asked to write about would be perhaps Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, and past questions have seen themes such as guilt, violence, the supernatural, power, gender and ambition. So let's have a little practice. So as you can see, here is an example Macbeth question. So an extract followed by a question. I just want you to spend some time reading, and then at the bottom I want you to identify what is the question focus. So what you should have put is that this question focuses on Macbeth as a violent character. So when looking at the extract, you would need to focus on in what ways Macbeth is shown as violent, and then also link that to other moments in the text where we look at Macbeth's violence. But before you start thinking about evidence that you would select from the extract, it's always useful to start thinking first about the key ideas that you want to explore in the essay, because then that makes finding evidence a lot easier. So I want you to spend some time just writing down some notes in response to the following questions. What acts of violence does Macbeth commit? Why does he commit the acts of violence? So what is the reason behind it? What are the consequences of his acts of violence? And overall, what message about violence do you think Shakespeare is trying to communicate in the play? Once you're clear about the types of ideas that you want to explore in your essay, you would form these into a thesis statement or an introduction. Now, you might start by saying, in the play, Shakespeare presents violence as, and outlining your main ideas, what Shakespeare is showing us about violence. And then you could talk about, through the characterisation of Macbeth, he aims to warn the audience. So what exactly is it that he's trying to warn the audience through the characterisation of Macbeth? Then once you're clear on the ideas that you want to explore about Macbeth's violence, now's the time to go back to the extract and start thinking about picking 2 to 3 pieces of evidence that will help support the points that you've made. So for example, if you've said that at the beginning here in Act 1, Scene 2, Macbeth's violence is brave and patriotic and shows loyalty to his country, you would need to select evidence that you think helps to highlight that idea. Now hopefully what you've highlighted is similar to some of the evidence that I've highlighted here. So as I said, in this extract, Shakespeare is showing that Macbeth's violence is patriotic. The reason his violence is patriotic is because he is using his violence in defence of his country in the battle between Scotland and Norway. Now we could start by talking about the things that the captain says about him. So the captain describes him as brave Macbeth, which shows that actually the violence that he's showing in battle is something that's admired by other soldiers, and also by King Duncan, who ends up rewarding him Thane of Cawdor for his performance in battle. So in this case, he's using acceptable violence because he's using the violence in defence of his country, and it's something that is honoured and rewarded. We could also then support that idea with brandish steel which smoked with bloody execution. When Shakespeare talks about brandishing steel, that shows that Macbeth drawing his sword, and through that metaphor smoke, Shakespeare is showing the speed with which Macbeth is killing the enemy in the battle. The use of that word bloody shows the really violent way in which Macbeth is killing the enemy, but might also help to foreshadow the violence that comes later. We could also look at this word execution. When we use the word execution, we think about the killing of a criminal. which helps to support the idea that Macbeth's using his violence here in a positive way, in an acceptable way, because actually what he's doing is he's killing people that pose a threat to the security of his country. We could extend that further by looking at the quotation that I've highlighted in blue, till he unseamed him from the nave to the chaps and fixed his head upon our battlements. So here is a reference to the way in which Macbeth kills a traitor to Scotland, so a soldier that was previously fighting for Scotland that changed sides. What Macbeth does is he uses his sword and he runs it up the body of the traitor from belly button to neck, and he unseams him. So he literally splits him open. But the important bit here is the fact that he fixes the head of the traitor upon the battlements. This was something that was commonly done to traitors, and it would act as a deterrent to anyone else that was thinking about going against the king or going against country, because it showed people what happened to traitors. It's kind of ironic because actually this is something that then ends up happening to Macbeth at the end when he himself becomes the traitor. Once you've got the points that you would want to make from the extract, that is when you need to make links to other moments in the play. So spend a few minutes just making a note of any moments in the play that you could write about that relate to Macbeth's violence and ultimately the ideas that you have written down in your thesis statement. So you may have written down some of the following. So you may have written down Macbeth's later killing of King Duncan and how he uses his violence here to gain power, so obviously to become king. You could talk about the extreme guilt that he feels after committing the regicide, which shows the consequences of his violence, because obviously in killing the king, he disrupts the natural order and faces punishment from God. You could then also talk about his indirect and unacceptable uses of violence to kill Banquo and later Macduff's family, which is motivated by the desire to keep power and eliminate any threats to his throne. Finally then, just as a reminder, when you're writing an essay, and this same thing applies here to A Christmas Carol, you need to start your essay with a clear thesis, as we've prepared earlier on, which outlines your key ideas about the theme or character that you're being asked about in the question. You must make sure that you write about at least 2 quotations from the extract that support your points and 2 other key moments in the play that support your points, so that link with the ideas that you got from the extract, but also the ideas that you've outlined in your thesis. When deciding the order of this, you perhaps want to think about what comes first chronologically in the play. So with the example that we've been looking at, the extract is from Act 1, Scene 2. So I would start by looking at the extract and then linking it to later moments in the play. But more importantly than that, drive your ideas by focusing on the intentions of the writer. So at all times make it clear that you understand how the evidence you've selected supports Shakespeare in communicating his overall message. Section B of the paper will be focused on A Christmas Carol. Similarly to the Macbeth section, you will be asked to comment on a theme or a character. Chances are the characters that you could be asked about would be Scrooge, perhaps the spirits. Previous themes that have come up are things such as redemption, the supernatural, greed, family, attitudes to Christmas, poverty and charity. So here's an example question. You will see your extract and it tells you whereabouts that extract comes from in the novella, and then you have a question at the bottom. Just write down for me now what you think the focus of the question is. What you should have identified is this question is asking you about Scrooge's attitudes to money and wealth. The reason that I picked this question is because essentially this question is asking you about greed. We've learnt about greed in lessons, but ultimately they've just reworded the question. Scrooge's attitude to money and wealth, this is about Scrooge's greed. So make sure that when you're looking at the question, even if it's reworded slightly differently to the way that we've learnt it in class, it still essentially is the same points that you're making. So let's start thinking about the key ideas that you could potentially explore in this response. So write down some notes for the following. So who is Scrooge characterised to represent? How does Scrooge view money and wealth? What impact has Scrooge's greed had on his life? What does Dickens want to show us about people that are focused on making money? That are only focused on making money? How did Dickens want these people to change, and what societal issue would this have helped to solve? Right, now let's look at your notes and help turn those ideas into your thesis statement. So you could start by saying, in the novella, Dickens presents Scrooge's attitude to money and wealth as, through the characterisation of Scrooge, he aims to warn the audience, in the hope that the Victorian reader would. Copy and complete this thesis statement. Okay, now that we've got an idea of the types of things that we want to explore, it should make looking at the extract easier. Just want you to read the extract and make a note and highlight or make a note of any evidence that you could use that helps to support your thesis statement. And we're looking at 2 to 3 pieces of evidence that we could use to back that up. So hopefully what you did highlight are things such as, when Belle says to Scrooge, another idol has displaced me, a golden one. And then she talks about how when they first got together in a relationship, when we were both poor and content to be so. Now what we could talk about in that first quotation, an idol. So an idol is someone you look up to. And we could talk about the fact that Scrooge idolises money. Money has become like the most important thing for him, like the thing that drives him. And in doing so, has displaced any chance of happiness. So the money has become more important than his relationship with Belle. And then she talks about it being a golden one. So she's really clear on the fact that actually it's his desire for wealth, his greed, that has driven a wedge between them. And then she reminds him that actually at one point they were both poor and content to be so. And that's Dickens' way of reminding the reader that actually it's not money that makes us happy, it's having one another, okay? So having relationships, having family. And actually at one point or another, Scrooge was happy to be poor and he was content, a lot like, say, the characters like the Cratchits. And actually it's his drive for money that's made him unhappy. He's lost his relationship with Belle, and as an old man, he's become quite isolated and alone. Now I'll spend some time making a list of other moments in the novella that link to Scrooge's attitude to money and wealth and the ideas in your thesis statement. So just some possible ideas. You could perhaps talk about Scrooge's refusal to donate money when asked by the charity collectors. You could talk about how Dickens implies that if Tiny Tim died, Scrooge would be indirectly responsible as he doesn't pay Bob a fair wage, so showing that lack of social responsibility. You could talk about Scrooge's redemption and the impact it has. He donates money to charity collectors and indirectly saves the life of Tiny Tim through his change. So finally, in the same way as Macbeth, your essay structure, you would start with a clear thesis that outlines your key ideas about the theme or character in the question. You would write about 2 key quotations from the extract that support your points. You'd then write about 2 other key moments in the novella that support your points. And as I said before, when deciding the order, think about what comes first chronologically. So if you're given an extract that's early on in the novella, you might want to start with that and then link it to later events. And remember to drive your ideas by focusing on the intentions of the writer. So why has Dickens written A Christmas Carol? What allegorical message did he want to explore? Just to finish off then, good luck and try your best. You've got this.